Hello everyone and welcome back to part 17 of 21, where we take a look back at what I wrote 1 year ago about the Democratic presidential candidates who participated in the first debate. And now we take a look at Amy Klobuchar, a senator from Minnesota who entered the race on February 10th, 2019 and exited the race on March 2nd, 2020. This is what I wrote. Klobuchar, the senior senator from Minnesota, has not really caught on in a way that leads one to assume she will be on the stage in Milwaukee on a Thursday in July 2020 accepting the nomination. However, it is still early, and if one of the other centrist-leaning candidates falls apart, the senator next door could get a promotion. Bottom line. As long as Klobuchar does not pummel a staff member on stage or say anything really dumb, she will be fine. She can only go up from her current position, and being re-elected to a new 6-year term in 2018, she really has nothing better to do. Klobuchar was a candidate that was like the Energizer Bunny of this campaign. Her campaign, people often pointed out, wow, she's polling really low. But she always had really good debate performances and kept going and going and going. So much, in fact, that shortly before the New Hampshire primary, on a Friday before the primary, they had a debate in New Hampshire, and this was after the impeachment vote in the Senate. And Klobuchar just had a breakout performance in that debate, and it propelled her into a third-place finish in New Hampshire. And that allowed her campaign to move on to Nevada and to South Carolina, and there was even talk at the time of, okay, this is how Klobuchar wins the nomination. This is how she puts together a path to winning. This was at the time everyone thinking that Biden was toast. She had a very shaky performance in both Nevada and South Carolina, and exited the race one day before Super Tuesday and endorsed former Vice President Joe Biden, and has been one of the leading surrogates for Biden on the trail ever since, and is mentioned as a top possibility to be Biden's vice presidential candidate. I always liked Klobuchar. I always thought she was really smart and articulate, and really a message that appealed to me, talking about things you can achieve. I remember one time, her and Elizabeth Warren had a disagreement, and she pointed out that if someone's not with you 100% of the time, they're not a bad person. And she really was going, in my opinion, for that more moderate, progressive wing of the Democratic Party, people that were fed up with Donald Trump, but were not ready to go over the cliff and support Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or that nature, but people that had concerns about Joe Biden, people that had concerns about Pete Buttigieg's inexperience. She filled a vacuum for them. I will admit that she was a third choice of mine. I flirted with supporting her campaign. But in the end, it came back to me that her best finish up till then had been a third-place finish in New Hampshire. And while impressive, it's still a third-place finish. You You had Buttigieg, who had won in Iowa, Sanders, who had won in New Hampshire and Nevada, and you knew that Biden was going to win in South Carolina at that point. So for me, it really became a question of viability. I expected her to do well in Minnesota, but that is also a state that Bernie Sanders won in 2016 over Hillary Clinton. So, and I also looked at the states that I thought she could be competitive in, and it just did not look promising. And also, it was an organizational and a funding issue. You have to have money in the bank to put ads on the air, fuel in the jet, and staff on the ground. Those are components of a presidential campaign that you have to have, and I simply didn't see her getting enough fusions of cash quickly enough to be really competitive. I think she would make a solid vice presidential pick for Joe Biden. I tend to think that the events of the last month have made that a little bit more of a remote possibility. I tend to think that Biden's probably going to go with a woman of color. I think that Val Demings is a member of Congress who's got a lot of potential upswing. I also think that if you take a look at it, you see people like Mayor Bottoms of Atlanta catching on. Always as well, Senator Kamala Harris is out there as a front-runner leader, and a candidate we will talk about later, and Senator Warren is another high-profile name on that list that is being speculated about. I will post a video at some point soon in the near future giving my opinion on people that are being mentioned as potential running mates for Biden. I think I'm probably going to extend this out to two more parts after we cover the Biden, what I wrote about Joe Biden, to cover why I think it turned out the way it did, and who Biden should pick as his running mate. I've got a list, just like I made a spreadsheet of all the Democratic presidential candidates and people that I thought would run. I mean, this list had realistic choices on it as Biden, Sanders, and Warren. And then it even had people on there like Oprah, Hillary Clinton, and Gavin Newsom. I mean, people that might have entered the race, I mean, in some wild scenario, but the likelihood that they were really wasn't. Well, I've made a similar list for the vice presidential candidates. I have some names on there that potentially could be the pick, and some names that probably obviously won't be the pick. But they're on there because they could end up being it. So, bottom line is Klobuchar was a really decent candidate. I really liked her presence in the race. And the joke I cracked about her pummeling a staff member, if everyone remembers correctly, just oddly enough, just like all the other candidates, who entered the race shortly before they entered or shortly after they announced, some mysterious story would drop about them that was a little bit advantageous to her run. I would also note that Senator Klobuchar and Senator Sanders' office in the Senate is quite close together. Not suggesting that the Sanders campaign had anything to do with that negative story about Senator Klobuchar at all, but just pointing that out. And they entered the Senate in the same year, so kind of close in seniority. I'll see y'all all tomorrow. Have a great day and a great night.